and brought to New England in 1761. John Wheatley, a wealthy Boston merchant, bought her for his wife, Susanna, who wanted a youthful personal maid to serve her in her old age. Wheatley was frail and sickly, but her gentle, demure manner charmed Susanna. The child learned to read and write quickly and became proficient in Latin, so the Wheatleys assigned her only light housekeeping duties and encouraged her to study and write poetry. As a result, she achieved a high level of education, rare for upper-class colonial men, let alone women or slaves. In fact, Wheatley was treated less like a servant and more like a member of the Wheatley family. She was given a private, well-heated room and a lamp to use at night. She was free to visit with the Wheatley's friends, but forbidden to associate with other slaves. It is believed that Wheatley began writing in 1765. Her poem, an elegiac poem on the death of that celebrated divine and eminent servant of Jesus Christ, the Reverend and learned George Whitefield, gained her national and international attention when it was published locally in 1770 as a broadside pamphlet and then reprinted in the newspapers throughout the American colonies and in England. Wheatley continued to write elegies and honorific verses to commemorate the lives of friends and famous contemporaries, as well as poems to celebrate important events. The introduction to this volume of poetry by Phyllis Wheatley is unusual, as the preface is an attestation by 17 men of Boston that she had indeed written the poems herself. We, whose names are underwritten, do assuring the world that the poems specified in the following page, whereas we verily believe written by Phyllis, a young Negro girl, who was but a few years since brought an uncultivated barbarian from Africa, and has ever since been and now is under the disadvantage of serving as a slave in a family in this town. She has been examined by some of the best judges and is thought qualified to write them. The collection of poems by Phyllis Wheatley followed a trip that she took to England. She was sent to England for her health when the Wheatley's son, Nathaniel Wheatley, was traveling to England on business. She caused quite a sensation in Europe. She had to return unexpectedly to America when they received word that Mrs. Wheatley was ill. Sources disagree on whether Phyllis Wheatley was freed before, during, or just after this trip, or whether she was freed later. Mrs. Wheatley died the next spring. The American Revolution intervened in Phyllis Wheatley's career, and the effect was not completely positive. The people of Boston and of America and England bought books on other topics rather than the volume of Phyllis Wheatley poems. It also caused other disruptions in her life. First, her master moved the household to Providence, Rhode Island, then back to Boston. When her master died in March of 1778, she was effectively, if not legally, freed. Mary Wheatley, the daughter of the family, died that same year. A month after the death of John Wheatley, Phyllis Wheatley married John Peters, a free black man of Boston. The Revolutionary War continued its disruption, and John and Phyllis moved briefly to Wilmington, Massachusetts, having children, trying to support the family, losing 2 children to death, and dealing with the war's effects on the shaky marriage. Phyllis Wheatley was able to publish few poems during this period. She and a publisher solicited subscriptions for an additional volume of her poetry, which would include 39 of her newer poems, but with her changed circumstances and the war's effect on Boston, the project failed. A few poems were published as pamphlets. In 1776, Phyllis Wheatley had written a poem to George Washington, lauding his appointment as commander of the Continental Army. That was while her master and mistress were still alive, and while she was still quite the sensation. But after her marriage, she addressed several other poems to George Washington. She sent them to him, but he never responded again. Eventually, John Peters deserted Phyllis, and to support herself and her surviving child, she had to work as a scullery maid in a boarding house. In poverty and among strangers, on December 5th, 1784, she died, and her third child died hours after she did. Her last known poem was written for George Washington. Her second volume of poetry was lost. And now we pause for a moment and go back in time to the days when Phyllis Wheatley lived, wrote, and died.
William, Earl of Dartmouth. Hail a happy day, when smiling like the morn, fair freedom rose New England to adorn. The northern clime beneath her genial ray, Dartmouth congratulates thy blissful sway. Elate with hope her race no longer mourns, each soul expands, each grateful bosom burns. While in thine hand with pleasure we behold the silken reins and freedom's charms unfold. Long lost to realms beneath the northern skies, she shines supreme while hatred faction dies. Soon, as appeared the goddess long desired, sick at the view she languished and expired. Thus from the splendors of the morning light, the owl in sadness seeks the caves of night. No more, America, in mournful strain of wrongs and grievous unredressed complain. No longer shalt thou dread the iron chain, which wanton tyranny with lawless hand has made and with it meant to enslave the land. Should you, my lord, while you peruse my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung? Whence flow these wishes for the common good, by feeling hearts alone best understood? I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Africa's fancy happy seat. What pines excruciating must molest, what sorrows labor in my parents' breast? Stilled was the soul, and by no misery moved, that from a father seized his babe beloved. Such my case, and can I then but pray others may never feel tyrannic sway? For favors past, great sir, our thanks are due, and thee we ask thy favors to renew, since in thy power as in thy will before, to soothe the griefs which thou didst once deplore. May heaven's grace the sacred sanction give to all thy works, and thou forever live, not only on the wings of fleeting fame, though praise immortal crowns the patriot's name, but to conduct to heaven's refulgent fane. May fiery coursers sweep thy ethereal plain, and bear thee upwards to that blissed abode, where like the prophet thou shalt find thy God.
The ethereal now, and now the empty skies. Well, with growing, I get so emotional sometimes when I read it. It just makes me think of my babies, you know? I bet it does. I'm gonna go. With growing splendors strike his wondering eyes, the angels view him with delight unknown, press his soft hand and seat him on his throne. Then smiling thus to this divine abode,
Child, where do you get those words from? Such pretty words, and the way you put them together.
sometimes the angels just come to me and they speak to my soul. Thrice welcome thou, the raptured baby's replies. Thanks to my God who snatched me to the skies. Vice trumpet had possessed my heart, yet the trumpeter had beguiled my heart.
You must have put your whole heart in those words.
I do. My words mean everything to me. Sometimes when I'm reading and it just takes me so far away from where I am that sometimes I think I can live there forever. Sometimes when I read it. It makes me feel so sad. And it hurts.
Collection. Nume begin. Inspire ye sacred nine, your venturous Africa in her great design. Nume, immortal power, I trace thy spring. Assist my strains while thy glories sing. The acts of long departed years by thee, recovered in due order ringed we see. The power the long forgotten calls from night, that sweetly plays before the fancy's sight. Nume, in our nocturnal visions pour the ample treasure of her secret stores. Swift, from above the wings her silent flight, through Phoebe's realms, fair regent of the night. And in her pomp of images displayed, to the high raptured poet gives her aid. Through the unbounded regions of the mind, diffusing light celestial and refined, the heavenly phantom paints the actions done by every tribe beneath the rolling sun.
To Neptune, on Mrs. Wheatley's voyage to England. While raging tempests shake the shore, while airless thunders round us roar, and sweep impetuous o'er the plain, be still, O tyrant of the main, nor let thy brow contracted frowns betray, while my Susanna skims the watery way. The power propitious hears the lay, the blue-eyed daughters of the sea, with sweeter cadence glide along, and Thames responsive joins the song. Pleased with their notes, all sheds benign his ray, and double radiance decks the face of day. To court thee to Britannia's arms, serene the clime and mild the sky, her region boasts unnumbered charms, thy welcome smiles in every eye. Thy promise, Neptune, keep, record my prayer, not give my wishes to an empty air.
Monarch, see, deprived of vital breath, a young physician in the dust of death. Dost thou go on incessant to destroy our griefs, to double and lay waste our joy? Enough, thou never yet wast known to say, though millions die the vassals of thy sway, nor youth, nor science, nor the ties of love, nor aught of earth thy flinty heart can move. The friend, the spouse from his dire dart to save, in vain we ask the sovereign of the grave, fair Marner, there see thy loved Leonard lay, and o'er him spread the deep impervious shade, closed are his eyes and heavy feathers keep.
You know, I've got one of your poems that I saw you jotted down once.
You do?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I have it with me.
I'd like to hear it.
Soon as the sun forsook the eastern main, the paling thunder shook the heavenly plain. Majestic grandeur from the zephyr's wing exhales the incense. More guarded, from the snares of sin. Child, where do you get your inspiration for these kinds of words?
Where do I get my inspiration? From this tree! From the dog! From everything! From the sun, from the skies, for everything! From these apples! From everything! Oh! I'm just so happy that I have pencil and paper now. Thanks to you, I can write again. You understand? I can write again. It's so wonderful. I'm so happy.
You know the Lord's with that child. That one has got to have him on her side. Mighty fine young man. On imagination. Imagination, who can sing thy force, or who describe the swiftness of thy course? Soaring through air to find the bright abode, the imperial palace of the thundering God. We on thy pinions can surpass the wind and leave the rolling universe behind. From star to star the mental optics rove, measure the skies and range the realms above. There, in one view, we grasp the mighty whole, or with new words amaze the unbounded soul.
David, undaunted thus, thy spear and shield shall no protection to the body yield. Jehovah's name, no other arms I bear, I ask no other in this glorious war. Today the Lord of hosts to me will give victory. Today the doom shall receive. The faith you threaten shall your own become, and beasts shall be your animated tomb. That all the earth's inhabitants may know that there is a glory, a God who governs all below. This great assembly too shall witness stand, that needs nor sword nor spear the Almighty's hand. The battle his, the conquest he bestows, and to our power consigns our hated foes. Oh, could I rival thine and Virgil's page, or claim the muses with the moon-tuned sage? Soon the same beauty should my mind adorn, and the same ardors my soul should burn. Then should my song in bolder notes arise, and all my numbers pleasingly surprise. But here I sit and mourn a groveling mind, that fain would mount and ride upon the wind. Not you, my friend, these plaintive strains become, not you, whose bosom is the muses' home. When they from tower and helicon retire, they fan in you the bright immortal fire. But I, less happy, cannot raise the song. The faltering music dies upon my tongue. The happier Terence all the choir inspired, his soul replenished and his bosom fired. But say, ye muses, why this partial grace to one alone of Afric's sable race, from age to age transmitting thus his name, with the first glory in the realms of fame. From Maecenas.
On the death of a young gentleman, who taught thee conflict with the powers of night, to vanquish Satan in the fields of fight, who strung thy feeble arms with might unknown. How great thy conquest, and how bright thy crown. War with each princedom, throne, and power is o'er. The scene is ended to return no more. Oh, how could my muse thy seat on high behold, how decked with laurel, how enriched with gold. Oh, could she hear what praise thy harp employs, how sweet thine anthems, how divine thy joys. What heavenly grandeur would exalt her strain, what holy raptures in her numbers reign. To soothe the troubles of the mind to peace, to still the tumult of life's tossing seas, to ease the anguish of the parent's heart, what shall my sympathizing verse impart? Where's the balm to heal so deep a wound? Where shall our sovereign remedy be found? Look, gracious spirit, from thy heavenly bower, and thy full joys into their bosoms pour. The raging tempest of their grief control, and spread the dawn of glory through the soul. To either path the saint departed trod, and trace into the bosom of his God.
You want to know where I get my inspiration from this? From this! Oh, please! That's where I get my inspiration from. Look at this kitten, so innocent and beautiful.
Are you sure that you're with child now?
I think so. And this time, nothing's gonna take my babies from me. I'm gonna take good care of myself and eat right. And I'm gonna have a healthy baby. I'm gonna be a mother this time.
You be careful now. Be real careful.
I will. This time I'm gonna be a mother. A real mother.
The gifted young black poet Phyllis Wheatley was celebrated as the extraordinary poetical genius of colonial New England even before this compilation of her poems was published in September 1773. Not yet 8 years old when she was brought to America from Africa in 1761. Wheatley was educated by her mistress, and her first poem was published in a Rhode Island newspaper when she was only 14. Her pious elegies for prominent English and colonial leaders became popular and were often reprinted in colonial newspapers or as broadsides. Wheatley's 1773 visit to London, ostensibly to improve her frail condition, was cut short by her mistress's failing health. Although she was entertained by William Legge, Earl of Dartmouth, the abolitionist Grenville Sharp, John Thornton, and Benjamin Franklin, Wheatley did not meet her patron, Selina Hastings, Countess of Huntingdon, to whom she dedicated her poems. The following poems were written originally for the amusement of the author, as they were the products of her leisure moments. She had no intention ever to have published them, nor would they now have made their appearance, but at the importunity of many of her best and most generous friends, to whom she considered herself as under the greatest obligation. As her attempts in poetry are now sent into the world, it is hoped the critic will not severely censure their defects, and we presume they have too much merit to be cast aside with contempt as worthless and trifling effusions. As to the disadvantages she has labored under with regard to learning, nothing needs to be offered, as her master's letter in the following page will sufficiently show the difficulties in this respect she had to encounter. With all their imperfections, the poems are now humbly submitted to the perusal of the public. The following is a copy of a letter sent by the author's master to the publisher. Phyllis Wheatley was brought from Africa to America in the year 1761, between 7 and 8 years of age, without any assistance from school education and by only what she was taught in the family. She in 16 months' time from her arrival attained the English language, to which she was an utter stranger before, to such a degree as to read any, the most difficult parts of the sacred writings, to the great astonishment of all who heard her. As to her writing, her own curiosity led her to it, and this she learnt in so short a time that in the year 1765 she wrote a letter to the Reverend Mr. Oakham, the Indian minister while in England. She has a great inclination to learn the Latin tongue and has made some progress in it. This relation is given by her master, who bought her and with whom she now lives. John Wheatley, Boston, November 14th, 1772.
Child, what are you doing down here? I told you to stay up in the house. Now, you must be careful. I told you that.
I just had to see my tree. get to see my
You need to stay up in the house and take care of that baby you're carrying.